But I was talking about the Global Power Platform Bootcamp and how, it's a lot of talent that is coming across the world and everybody's sharing their ideas. But also it's not just for people to learn, but also for speakers like us to go into outside of our comfort zone and try new technologies or we haven't tried before, and then see the art of possible. And throughout the day, you're going to see some of my colleagues. You saw Gab before and then Clive later today, where they really invested into understanding the new AI technology and capabilities and how it actually they realized that, hang on, why do we live? What's the purpose of our existence? Because there's so much that you can do with it. A couple of years ago, I took on the challenge to go and present virtually at the Arabic Global Power Platform Bootcamp that was hosted in Saudi Arabia. Completely different experience than what we do in other countries, because every couple of hours they would stop and they would say it's time to go for the prayer, and then everybody would go pray and then they would come back and continue. And then if you're a speaker and then you take 5 minutes more, that's very offensive because you're going into the prayer time and so on. So it was an interesting experience, but also the way they positioned themselves in terms of speakers, there was always you've got more experience than me, then I have to respect you by default. And then I realized that those people were actually inducing fear into the audience. The keynote was like, we're doomed. That's it. AI is going to take over. No one is going to believe it anymore and so on. And I'm like, this is probably one of the worst keynote sessions that I heard. Instead, what we're trying to teach here is that you need to embrace the capability in here. There's a lot that it can do for you, but it will definitely not replace you. It is a co-pilot, not an autopilot. So it's very important to have that knowledge about what good looks like and what you want to achieve. This is something that AI will never be able to change in terms of being subjective, being creative, having that vision and what we want to achieve. And then AI will help support you to do the mundane and the things that usually take a lot of time, that are not really creative in a way. So in a way, that's what my session is going to be about today. So a little bit about myself. I'm Rami. Probably a lot of you have seen me before, have met me. Time to update that picture. Under that beard, I look like that, I promise. I'm from Wellington, so I flew up this morning just so I can. What's happening? So I flew up this morning to attend this conference, and I'm heading back tonight. And I am an MVP. I'm quite active in the community, so we run the yearly conferences, the New Zealand Business Application Summit, as well the Global Power Platform Bootcamp. This year, I decided not to do it in Wellington, to have it virtual in Wellington, and to focus the attention in Auckland. And because I had my colleagues presented in here, it would make more sense to come over here. A little bit about yourself. So sorry, the online audience, but for people in the room, how many of you are Dynamics Power Platform consultant or customers? So the majority. How many of you consider yourself functional, more on the low-code side? Half, and technical? In the middle. So good. We've got a good audience in here, and hopefully what I'm going to say is going to resonate with you guys. So I've got, being in Wellington, political capital of New Zealand, most of our customers are in the public sector. So we work with the Department of Internal Affairs. We built their passport and citizenship system. So if you renew your passport, you apply for a passport for yourself or for someone else, it will go through some code that me and my colleagues have written. MB, we look after their visa application, ADAPT project, and this is coming through some renewals as well. So there's some exciting stuff in here. So pretty large transformation programs that the government has gone to. I've worked with tertiary education, TEC, anything to do with student loans, you go through them. Some code that I've written will go there. And also Oranga Tamariki, the Ministry of Children, which is quite an interesting one because this is the one where really realized that making a security mistake is a life or death situation. So it really puts things into perspective and then really pushes you to work really hard. Some of my other customers are in the financial industry, so Westpac and BNZ are a good example. So I've got one message for you guys today, and It's really important that the best solutions don't accept the status quo.
Hey.
Right. So whenever you see something, don't go, oh, but this is how we've been doing it in the past. Like this is how everybody's doing it. Think outside of the box. Think about how you can change things, how you can make things better to your advantage. Now, working on big, large transformation programs, we usually have a large number of people, and a lot of them would be, as for you guys today, citizenship developer or pro dev. A lot of people think that it is actually two circles, and then those two circles meet somewhere in the middle, where as a good functional consultant, you might know a little bit of code. As a good pro developer, you're actually good at talking to customers and things like that. But the way I like to see it, and some people think of it, is a spectrum, right? Where you're a little bit more on this side or a little bit more on that side. But after actually going too much into the details and then really breaking it down into all the different disciplines that we do, I realize it's more like a web, right? So those are all the technologies that we know, and how good are you or how not good are you in them. So when it comes to, for example, reading code, so whether it's JavaScript or C#, that's something that maybe the functional consultant would not be good at it, but some of the really good ones would understand the code, but not necessarily have to write it and so on. In schema, like this is something that the functional consultants will be mastering, and then they'll be able to talk to the customer and advise them on how to do things. It's really important to have those ideas in terms of where do we fit. So as my role on Terra Manaki, which is the passport transformation program, as well as the citizenship, I was responsible for ensuring that everybody that we have on the team is utilized at their best, but also to encourage them to do things that they may be not comfortable to do by using tools that will make it easy for them. An example, the first thing that you do when you submit your passport application is to go through something called identity proofing. So lots of people that work with me know what identity proofing is. They've heard it a million times. Identity proofing is when you say, I am such and such, this is my passport number, I do liveness, so I take my phone, it takes a live video of my face, it flashes colors, and that's a very important process because that process will first of all make sure that it's not a deep fake. It can detect deep fake. It will make sure it's not an image. It will make sure you're not dead because it reflects into your retina, and that color, that reflection will allow them to know that you're a person alive. So all of that is to avoid fraud and issuing a passport for someone who's not eligible to have a passport. And the New Zealand passport is worth a lot of money on the black market. I've learned that from the people working at DIA. So any rules go through identity proofing to prove really who you are. So we've got some reference of you, we've got your image on file because you've applied for a previous passport, we've got your new application image, we've got your liveness, we triangulate those three, we know you are the person you claim you are and you're alive, and then you're submitting an application. We go check some other information such as, have you had a name change recently that you didn't tell us about? Or are you actually alive? We go check in the death register and so on. So there's hundreds of rules that run. Now, typically, to run those rules, a lot of people would think Power Automate. Let's go and create 300, 400 Power Automates for all those rules. And imagine maintaining a rule. Imagine figuring out that, hang on, there's a new requirement that says we need to go and change that rule. Which Power Automate was it? What do I need to change in that Power Automate? Where's that value that says, a child is actually 16 or 18 or whatever? Like, where is all of this information? It becomes really difficult. So we use a lot of tools to help us visualize that. A lot of us really like using Mermaids. This is stage 1 of 4 in identity proofing. And I purposefully did it like that so you can't read what's in there because it's all the rules that are run.
Top secret.
Top secret. And this is the simplest one. Right. So imagine every one of those rhombus that you see in here is a rule that is detected. So this is a decision that is made and then goes and fires all those rules, and then based on the results then you get all those decisions that are made, and then you have more rules and so on. So maintaining those was an absolute nightmare, and we thought, all right, the status quo of using Power Automate is not what we want. We need something else. We need to build something new. So don't accept the status quo, as I told you guys. So we decided to replace those Power Automates with an engine. And that engine is basically responsible for gathering the information that it needs, marrying it with a rule, and deciding what's going to happen. So the way it works is that we've got some plugins that trigger every time a task is completed. It's going to call what we call the evaluation engine, is going to get the rules associated with that task, is going to get the payload, which is give me the information I'm interested in, is going to marry them together. And then based on the outcome of that, it's going to decide what the next action is. The next action could be your application is approved. The next action could be, hey, there's another task that we have to trigger, another automation that we have to trigger. It could be that there's a Power Automate that we have to call, or there's an integration point where we need to retrieve more information, whatever it is. But that's it in general. So the important thing to note is that we need to author rules based on the task that we've got. And we need to author the payloads to retrieve information from Dataverse so that we have the rule and the information, feed them together, and then get an outcome out of it. So I'm going to go a little bit down into the details of the implementation. This is going to show you the different tables that we used. So this is the schema that we used. Every task will have a task type. Task type will have what we call the evaluation group. The evaluation group will have the rule and the rule items associated with it. So this is the rules that we trigger, but then the group puts all those rules together to say, all right, well, those are the 3-4 rules that we need to check every time this task is completed, that we can decide what the next action is. Relatively straightforward. And then within the evaluation group, given that we know what the task type is, we can say, all right, well, this is the template, payload template that will tell us where to get the information from Dataverse. So that simplifies the retrieval of the data, so you don't have to go into Power Automate and then write OData queries and then get the bits that you want and so on. It will simplify the authoring of the rules because they're actually records in Dynamics. And that makes it really easy to deploy from one environment to the other without having to worry about doing a full-fledged deployment. Engine is there, the engine is stable, and the engine works. That gives you a high understanding of what it looks like. Now, to author a rule takes time, right? We used to do it in Power Automate. A rule would take us about a day, 8 hours. And then we came up with that structure in terms of how we're going to do it. So like, okay, let's try and feed it through data. Now, there are many ways that you can edit data in Dataverse and in Dynamics, which is really powerful for us. But this is me recording a 1-minute video of how I create a rule, right? So I go to the evaluation group, as I said, I give it a name, I save it, and I go and create the payload template because they're associated with each other. Usually they have the same name. It's Rami Group Payload Template, so relatively the same. Then I go and select it in here, lots of clicking. I know what I'm doing because I've done it a million times. I'm relatively quick at it. And then I have to define what the task type is. Usually, again, same name as the group because it's driven by the task itself. So I go and update some information. It's usually, this is a pass-fail type of group. Once I'm done that, I add a couple of criteria so that we know that, when the task is created, those are the things that you can select in here and then create them. So I create a pass, I create a fail. It takes time, it saves, and then I have to save and close. I go back to my evaluation group. I need to select the task type. Once I've got that, then I've got my group done. But then I still have to go and create the rules and so on. And this is just at a very high level. It becomes very complicated, not complicated, but time consuming when I need to go and do the template because I need to know what the schema is called. So I need to go into the templates, and I didn't record that, but go and figure out where is that schema available and then go and copy and paste it, add it in there. It's error prone, it's time consuming. We do have safeguards around it to make it faster, but anyway, we reduced the time to create a rule from 8 hours to 4 hours, right? So that was really good. And then in terms of optimizing the authoring, we're like, okay, well, let's use something like the Excel Online integration. It's out of the box. If you have a rule that looks similar to a previous rule that we've done, we can copy paste those and then just change the names and then upload the Excel spreadsheet, and that will automatically go and generate the elements that you want. So it's very straightforward, but a little bit time consuming. And I'm like, okay, well, how can we improve that? What is that tool that allows me to minimize the number of clicks that will surface the data for me and then guide me towards what I can do? Tool is Copilot. So I talked to one of our grads in the team, and I'm like, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to create hyper automation So this is something to note, that it's not necessarily AI. So there's nothing crazy that it's doing. It's actually very driven by instructions on what we want to do. So you give it some information and for more information. So all of that is defined in Copilot, very much similar to what we used to do in Power Virtual Agent. And then it's calling Power Automate to go and generate the structure that we need. And that reduced the time to actually create those rules from 8 hours to 4 hours to half an hour, significantly less. I can do a demo now, but I'm just worried I'm not going to have time.
Yes, please.
Actually, I'll do it. See it online? You can see. Yes. So what I'm going to do here, this is my rule author Copilot. I didn't even bother putting it into Teams or embedding it into Dynamics or anything like that. I just wanted to show you the raw experience that we've got. All I have to say is that I want to create a new rule group. There's quite a few topics that are related to rules and rule groups and so on. So it gets confused at the beginning, and it's probably going to ask me whether exactly to clarify what I'm trying to achieve in here. Just tried that and it worked. Yeah, here you go. Okay, so what we're going to do is a rule group creation. Now there's a few topics in here that is going to attach them all together. So it was going to start by creating the rule group. The first thing it's going to ask me is what's the rule group name, GPPB, today, whatever. With a name. So remember when I created the group, I created the payload template and then I created the task type associated with it. Now it's asking me, what does this group do? So give it a description. So GPPB, rule of the day, whatever. Like I give it a little bit of description. And now I don't have to go and create 3 different elements in here. It actually goes and creates everything that is required. So it says, please wait while I go and create it. What it's doing in here is calling Power Automate, generating the structure for me, and then coming back saying, okay, this is done. And then it's asking me, do you want to create any criteria record for this task type? So remember, I had the pass and fail. So I can say, yeah, I want to do that. I want to do a pass. Then it goes and creates it in Power Automate. And I say, yes, I want to do another one. And I'm going to say, yes, I want to create a fail. So it turns into prompt development rather than actually clicking and figuring out exactly what you want. And you don't have to guess where to go. It's telling you what information it needs. And after that, it's going to say, well, are there more criteria? No, there isn't. And then it's going to ask me if I want to create a rule. And I'm saying, yes, I want to create a rule. And it's going to ask me, what do you want to call that rule? I want to call it as rule 1. So now we're going down yet another level from the rule group, the task type, the criteria associated with that, the template, and now we're going down into the rules and so on. So it carries on until we create all the rules. And once I'm done with creating all of them, then I say no, and then it stops in there. So significantly expedited the way we actually author our rules and the way we actually do the work. But this is part of the conversation. The thing that was really powerful about what we did, about that engine that we built, given that it's custom built, it's written in C#, and it's using the plugins that everybody's used to in Dynamics and in Dataverse. We're like, okay, well, there's decades of experience when it comes to clean code in terms of unit testing, when we're talking about pro code, things like C# and Java and all the modern languages. So we're like, okay, let's use that to our advantage. There are lots of tools provided by the community that would make the authoring of this code really clean and able to do things without connecting to Dynamics 365. And this is exactly the patterns that we use. So, and I'm a big nerd. I'm a .NET developer by heart. I've been doing it for years. Actually, this is something that Clive said. So I actually built that engine on my ride on the train. Right, so my train ride is 45 minutes every day, 45 minutes in, 45 minutes out. And I'm like, okay, I've got that vision that I want to build that rule. So I started building it while I was on the train. Because I've got C# experience, I didn't need an internet. I knew exactly what I was doing. Probably today, if I were to do it again, I probably would do it in a fraction of all of that by using Copilot and telling it what to do. But I started, writing class by class, generating everything, creating the unit test, using design patterns, and so on. And Clive was saying, oh, that must be the Trans-Siberian train that goes to I don't know where, given how much we actually created. But the idea behind it is to separate the different concerns, right? So there's an engine, there's something responsible for the payloads, there's something responsible for the entry, the plugins, and things like that. So clean code was very important for me, just so that we can have that separation. We even took that a step further, and even our unit test classes use OO paradigms, object-oriented fundamentals, to have abstraction, to have interfaces, to have everything set up in a specific way so that we can play with it and do more with it. And this is what we ended up with. So a plugin typically has an entry point. So it starts somewhere when an event is triggered, and then it calls your actual plugin, the business logic in there, and usually connects to Dataverse. Now, because we've done clean code, we can separate everything. We can, instead of having a plugin, we can have a custom action in there. And having a custom action, we can do it as a custom API. And then we realize we can actually call it from a unit test. So we can bypass all of that, the entry point, and then trigger it on our machines by using unit testing capabilities. And even better, because we've segmented it and then we separate it in a way that is using modern design patterns, we can even abstract the data layer. We can say, well, today we're not connecting to Dataverse. Today we're running those unit tests locally on our machine. We have a Dataverse in memory that is created in less than a second, or we even can mock that and then create something that is very simple, and then feed the data as CSV files, and then go and test hundreds, thousands of rule permutations to make sure that what we've created is correct. Well, that's all good. So now we've got the engine, but then how long is it going to take to create those rules and to create those specific unit tests, to create the different permutations? And again, this is where AI comes in and helps us with generating all of that. This is what the next part is going to be. I'm going to swap to my code. Visible? Can you guys see, or is that going to be too small? Clive, do you know how to plus? Here we go. Perfect. Right. So I'm stealing a bit of Clive's thunder, but I was doing it first in ChatGPT, and then both Gab and Clive, like, why are you doing that? That's the competition. Come on, like, use something that is more Microsoft-y. So instead, we're using GitHub Copilot. So I've got a Pro license in here that allows me to, do a little bit more and then play with it. But what I'm going to demonstrate in here is how to create a set of CSV files that would read this information. So a good example would be, I want to create a rule that will check if I am a child or not. So the most important rule that we've got in the passport system is if it's a child application, that it has its own processing, because you need a caregiver, you need a referee. We can't use the image, because if you're under 15, then we can't, the image recognition is not going to work as accurately, and so on. So there are many rules associated with it. So what I would do is I would go in and want to create something specific. So let's say I want to create, so I'm going to select a prompt. So those prompts in here are the directives that tell the Copilot on how to behave and teach it what it needs to do. Very similar to what Gab was talking about earlier, is that this is the skill that it needs to understand. So the first one that I'm going to start with is add CSV prompt. And hopefully I've got the text that goes with it. So I want to add data CSV file for my rule. Quickly check that this is the right one. Sorry, this is the part. Yeah, I think this. So this is where you're going to create a CSV file that has some rule permutation. And it's going to think about it. It knows that there's a prompt in there, and it will try to understand what the prompt is saying. And then based on that, it's going to come back with an answer. It's generating, as you can see, and is going to look at what needs to be done. So I've given it the structure of what my CSV file looks like. I've taught it a skill. So this is the rule name that we have to define. This is the Boolean field, child or not. And then, this is the expected outcome from the rule. So the next thing it's going to tell me is, I need to know the name of the rule that you want to test. So in this case, I'm going to say, this rule is going to call this child. So now that I've given it this information, it will take this and then we'll start generating the CSV file, and it might ask me for some additional information. So very good progression in terms of like understanding what are the things that needs to be done and what it does. So it's automatically created the CSV file. As you can see, the rule name is child, true, is child false. It automatically knew how to call my unit tests. And I didn't even give it the instruction. I just said that the rule is called is child, and it's expecting a Boolean field, and it automatically understood the permutation that is true or false. So this is a very simple example where I'm just doing a true false value, and because there's only a binary, it's 2 lines in the data file. So now let's take it to the next level, and let's say, all right, well, what if I have many permutations, right? So create a CSV permutation. In this example, you get to a task, and the task is responsible to go and have a look at maybe 2, 3, 4 different variables, and then you need to make sure that it comes up with the same result. What? So in here it's like, okay, I understand that. You need to tell me what are the different fields that you want to call, right? And then based on those fields, it's going to try and do a binary permutation between all of those. So provide the rule name. What is the name of the rule that you want to test? So let's see if this is going to come in. Is child, has parent, has passport. Let's see if this is going to take it. And then hopefully it will come up with permutations that are required. Because this is where you want to test that. You want to test that all the permutations are going to have the correct outcomes at the end of the day. So you go and feed it to an AI capability, and you say, all right, well, tell me what are the different things. So we've got 3 elements. So is child, has passport, has referee, 3 elements, and all of those are binary. So 2 to the power 3, so 2 times 2 times 2 gives you 8. So it gives you 8 different permutations, and it actually called them. It gives them a name that would actually describe what it's trying to do. So only child, adult with both, adult with passport, adult with referee. So it gives you that understanding of what the context is and what it's trying to do. So to me, the amount of time that we can save by just telling it what we want to do and then generates all those permutations and give you the results is absolutely fascinating. So then we're like, okay, well, now that we've created that, let's go to the difficult part that's time consuming, and that's figuring out what the payload is. For that, I'm going to use the create payload template prompt. And again, it understands what I'm trying to do. So I want to create a payload template. So when I give it this instruction, it goes, all right, well, somewhere in there, I've got the schema. And I understand what that schema looks like. In this example, the schema looks like, it's GPPB underscore and then a variable name. And it has the description or the logical name of that field. So it's like, well, I know where it is. I know like everything that is in my Dataverse because I've already extracted it ahead of time. But now when I say I want to create a payload that will have first name, last name, and gender. And when I do that, it goes into my schema. It picks up those records. It figures out what the schema name is. And then it follows the convention to actually remove the prefix and then replace it with Pascal casing. So GPPB first name turns into first name, last name turns into last name. Like it does the capitalization, understands all the different words. And that's part of my rule that is done by generating the schema that I needed. So that now we have the template, right? The last thing that we're going to do is to say, all right, well, I want to create a rule for that. So we've created the different data elements, the CSVs, we created the template. Now I want to create a rule. So I selected the rule prompt. Then I want to create a new rule. Now again, it understands how it does because I've trained it to do that. It has the prompt, it knows what it needs to do. And finally, it's going to come and ask me, what do you want that rule to be? So in this example, we're going to use something simple because we've created a template that has, first name, or it has the first name, last name, and gender. See what it's going to be. So is male is, for example, the one that I want to try. See what this is going to do. So it took the name and it understood that there is actually a gender element in here, and it's going to go and create it, and it automatically created the rule for me. The payload item is gender. This is what it came out with, equals male. Now, the thing that is really scary is that we told it what the rule is, and then the next one is going to ask me is, is this the correct payload that you want to use? What is the comparison operation and so on? So it came up with some additional information. It didn't show me this information, this prompt, but before it was like, oh, hang on, I know how to create the test data for you. Do you want me to start creating unit tests for you and then generate that data? And then when I said yes, it actually automatically created the is male, is not male, true, false, the different permutations and so on. So because it all fits together, it understands how it works, it understands what are the different capabilities that are available in there.
Would it be because you did it before, it hasn't done it again?
Yeah, probably. Sometimes with the prompts, like I can definitely tell it to link those two together so that by the time I finish creating my rule, then it goes back and creates the other elements. So very quickly, because it's a technology that we're familiar with and we've used before, we know exactly how plugins work. One of the biggest concerns that the department had was, is it actually going to perform? So we're like, okay, well, we can unit test it. We can see exactly how every element of it is going to perform. So let's put it to the test. So we had a look at, the sequence diagram of all the different layers that is going to call, and we stress test it over thousands of different permutations and different executions. And what we've noticed is that it would run in less than a half a second. Take a specific element and to run a rule associated with it. So the majority of the read operations are really light, under 100 milliseconds. The write operation and the action is like write something in output or something, usually takes a little bit more than 100 milliseconds. But the best part is actual evaluation takes no time. When I was trying it on my machine and then doing all the performance testing, the evaluation would take a few hundred milliseconds. But because you're using the power that is available on the Microsoft data centers, the performance was insane. So 0 milliseconds to actually do the rule and execute it. Now compare that to a Power Automate that takes a time in receiving the request and then deciding what to do and then executing and all of that. We've reduced it significantly. On average, and this is best case, worst case. Worst case was 3 seconds, but that's when it's really cold and nothing's happening. The average was 400 milliseconds. I think even though plugins have a 2-minute timeout, the rule of thumb is that if it takes more than 2 seconds, then consider removing it from a plugin, but we were way below that. So that was really good. So again, recapping, 100 Power Automates that we had that turned into this one engine powered by data that we can easily move between different environments. Just to summarize the results at the end, we reduced the complexity by 90% by, simplifying things, empowering people that may not be comfortable using Power Automate to just use data to author those rules, then to use simple mechanism to move it from one environment to the other. Because it's data, we can just use the configuration migration tool or CSV imports or whatever we want to move that stuff around. From a rule authoring perspective, again, we had the 8-hour using Power Automate that reduced to 4 hours, and then finally reduced to 30 minutes or 15 minutes, 30 minutes to do that. And on top of that, we had really strong test coverage, which really helped us in understanding, like whether the rules are authored correctly, whether they're going to work, and whether they're not going to be. We talked about the streamline of the deployments. And finally, in terms of execution, a Power Automate would usually take about 3 to 4 seconds, and now we're down to half a second. So that was an improvement of 85% when it came to performance. This is just one of the examples where we thought, all right, we're not going to accept the status quo. We're going to think about a different way of doing it. We're going to embrace the fact that we've got diverse culture, but people that are pro developers and people that are local developers, and then put them together and then use them to the best of their capabilities. And then we looked at how we can maintenance and how we can reduce time to delivery by leveraging AI capabilities, but also by simplifying.
Got a question from Nadraj there.
That's it for me. Questions? structure of the prompt file. Is this a specific convention for GitHub Copilot, or is this something you came up with based on multiple tests to a certain works and what doesn't work? Right, so to answer that, it's a bit embarrassing. I copied what Clive did. Is it a convention or not? I don't know, but it worked. Is it the best? I don't know, because it was good enough and I stopped there. I can probably improve it. And a good example is how it actually didn't link this time back to the unit test when it did it for all the demos, the preparation that I did, but not this time. But yeah, maybe Clive will talk a little bit more about the prompts later in his. Ask Clive.
I have DVD.
What comes conversation?
Comes the session after lunch. 2 o'clock. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, go ahead, Nathan.
The rules engine, is that like a CPQ type of thing, or is it something else that you built? That does like configuration, one of those types of rule engines?
I think so. It was built from scratch. And the idea behind it. So a lot of the things that I do on my day-to-day job is to identify patterns and think, all right, well, if we're going to repeat it 1 million times, let's build a tool to do that for us. So the rule was always some data happens, and then we need to check what that data is. And based on this result, we're going to do A or B. And that's how the rule started. So it probably can be extended to do other things as well. But yeah, like, you know, it keeps evolving, right? So every time we're like, oh, maybe we can do this, maybe we can do that. So for example, the rules engine is responsible for moving from one business process flow stage to the other. So once you finish all the tasks associated with the business process flow, it goes, right, we're satisfied with this one, let's move it to the next stage. And that's what we do for identity proofing, 4 stages driven by BPF, and it moves from one to the other. It probably can be extended to do other things, but
User context which the plugin runs.
user context and which
Because we have the API limitations for user context, like 5 minutes, a particular user can only hit 5,000.
So when it's running, I think that I'll have to run the system. System?
About it, yeah. Yeah.
Well, it runs as the actual user.
The user doesn't have privileges to do what the engine can do. So the engine can create tasks, but users can't create tasks. They can't determine their own work.
Yeah.
The engine determines the work for them.
Exactly. So here you go, elevated privilege. So there are ways around like addressing the limitations. Usually they use multiplexing if you have it, or just do the analysis in terms of what needs to be executed and how often, and see how you can spread that across multiple technology. It's like when my mom is doing a big feast. I'm like, man, how do you do that? She's like, I use every utensil that I have in my kitchen. So just spread the load on all the different things so that you can actually avoid meeting those limits. But it was really important for us to do the analysis up front to understand like what is the threshold. Like FRs were super important for us, right? So you know, if it goes beyond what the platform can do, then that's probably not a good example to use there. Have to understand the load and then build.
I think that's worth mentioning.
Sorry?
Any retry mechanisms you have done, or?
We didn't need it. The retries is in a slightly different context. So whenever we have a connection to an external system, we don't trust that that connection is going to work. So we do have like automatic retries that if something fails due to a network glitch or something like that, we'll do an automatic retry. Not for the engine itself. We didn't need it.
Because sometimes Dataverse itself goes down
Yeah.
when connecting, so just want to check.
Yeah. No, we trust that it will work. And most of them are like atomic, right? And transactional, right? So if something goes wrong, then it will revert that transaction. Nothing will happen.
So those measurements, like the estimation, that is coming through your process mining, the amount to execute.
Yeah, so I embedded a logging into the plugin and I turned verbose on. I executed like thousands of different rules, extracted the logs, put them into ChatGPT to give me the information, and then we got the numbers out.
Yeah, because that is so crucial when you are measuring like
Yeah.
how much time we are actually saving.
Exactly. And that's why using a familiar technology like C# that is known to have good logs and all of that existing patterns was really beneficial for us.
What are you saying?
For the performance, when a task triggers the evaluation engine, it does 4 requests. It gets the group, the rules, the payload. So it's only 4 requests, but then it can do all of the calculations for all of the rules within memory. So that gets around the need to do lots of requests.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not cached, right? Like each time it retrieves
Yes.
all the rules.
Yeah.
It's not cached like you just cache and place it somewhere, and then it's not like
Plugin. So
we can't.
We call it all the time. Cool. Hopefully I inspired you guys to try some different things and go outside of the norm and then use a little bit of AI. But thank you very much for attending. Looking forward to the rest of the sessions today.